For 6 years, I sent money to my parents' account every single month without missing a payment. $1,200, like clockwork. When my dad left his job and my mom got laid off, I didn't hesitate. I told them I would handle it. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, worked weekends, skipped vacations, and never bought anything I didn't absolutely need. I told myself it was temporary, that families help each other, and that one day, maybe, they would see how much I gave up for them. Then, one random Sunday, I came home and found Derek, his wife Megan, and their two kids unpacking their suitcases in the living room. Toys were already on the floor, bottles in the kitchen, and my space was full of their noise and presence. No one had called. No one had asked. They had just moved in like it was their right. They said it would be for a little while, just until things got better. But that wasn't what happened. They didn't just move into the house. I slowly started disappearing from it. Room by room, moment by moment, I was being pushed aside without anyone realizing it. Or maybe they realized and just didn't care. At first, I stayed quiet. I thought maybe it was just temporary. I thought if I gave it time, I would adjust. I told myself that family isn't always fair, but it's supposed to stick together. I waited for balance. I waited for understanding. I waited for someone to ask if I was okay. But fairness doesn't show up on its own. It only comes when it's invited, and no one had left a seat at the table for me. My name is Katie Miller. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a nurse in the intensive care unit at a hospital in Richmond, Virginia. I've been taking care of things since I was 15, not because someone asked me to. It just happened that way. I was the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who always figured it out. My younger brother Derek was the center of attention from the start. He was loud, charming, and good at making people laugh. I was the one who sat at the edge of the room, doing the dishes, picking up after everyone, and making sure there was gas in the car when no one else remembered. When Derek moved to New Jersey with his wife Megan to build a business, my parents acted like they were sending their son off to war. They missed him so much. They talked about him constantly. Every time I came home from a long shift, my mom would mention how smart Derek was or how brave he was for chasing his dreams. They never asked what my day was like. I stayed. I paid the bills. I picked up groceries, filled prescriptions, and handled every little thing that came up. When Dad started getting sick more often, it was me who took him to his appointments. When the roof leaked, I found the contractor and paid the deposit. When my mom lost her part-time job, I quietly took over the utility bills. There was never a conversation about it. They would just leave the envelopes on the counter. That was their way of asking. And I never said no. I gave up vacations. I skipped birthdays. I turned down overtime offers at the hospital just to be home in case they needed me. I didn't see it as sacrifice. I thought I was doing the right thing. It felt like my duty. I told myself that one day it would matter. That maybe, just maybe, someone would notice. It didn't happen like that. One Sunday afternoon after a long shift, I came home and the house was different. There were extra shoes by the door, toys on the couch, a stroller in the hallway. I heard voices from the kitchen and saw Megan cooking while Derek scrolled through something on his phone. Their two kids were playing on the floor, right where I usually drop my bag. No one warned me they were coming. No one asked if it was okay. They had already moved in. My mom greeted me like everything was normal. My dad offered me a cold soda and told me Derek and his family would be staying for a little while because things didn't work out in New Jersey. The business failed, apparently. They needed a place to reset. I stood in the middle of the living room, exhausted, still wearing my scrubs, and felt something inside me sink. This was my home. I paid every bill. I cleaned this house. I made sure it stayed standing. But suddenly, it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like I had been pushed aside without anyone even noticing. The next day, my mom suggested I move my things downstairs into the basement just for now. Derek's kids needed the extra room, and Megan didn't want them sleeping on the couch. The basement was dark and musty. The ceiling was low, and the water heater made this loud humming sound all night. But I didn't argue. I just nodded and carried my clothes down the stairs. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could live with it. I kept paying the mortgage. I kept doing the grocery runs. I kept coming home to a crowded house full of noise and tension. and no one thanked me. No one even acknowledged what I was giving up. Sometimes, I would come home after a 12-hour shift and find that all the food I bought was already gone. The cereal, the milk, the snacks, all eaten. The dishes were piled in the sink. Dirty laundry was spilling into the hallway. I would clean up quietly and go downstairs to my room in the basement, trying not to cry from frustration. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the unfinished ceiling, I realized something. I had become a guest in the house I paid for. I was invisible in my own life. Everyone else came first, always. It had been that way since I was a teenager, and now, more than ever, it was clear that nothing had changed. I thought about how many times I had put myself last. I remembered the birthday I spent alone at the hospital because no one remembered to call. I remembered skipping out on a trip with my friends because I had to fix the heater at home. I remembered every little moment where I swallowed my needs and told myself it was fine. But now I wasn't sure it was fine. Something inside me had started to shift. I didn't know what to call it yet. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was sadness. Maybe it was just exhaustion. But for the first time in years, I couldn't silence it. I couldn't talk myself out of it. I couldn't pretend anymore. And as I lay there, listening to the footsteps above me and the sound of Derek's baby crying through the vents, I realized that my silence had bought everyone else comfort, except me. I didn't know it yet, but that night was the beginning of something different. Something small and quiet, but strong. Something that wouldn't go away this time. Derek came back like he had never left. One day, everything was normal, and the next, there were extra shoes by the front door, backpacks on the couch, and a baby bottle sitting on the kitchen counter like it had always been there. Megan was already moving through the house like it belonged to her. Their 2 kids ran through the hallway, leaving toys in every corner. My bedroom door was wide open, and I could see they had started putting their things in there. His voice echoed from the kitchen as he laughed with my dad, completely at ease. It felt like I had walked into someone else's house. I stood there in my scrubs, holding my bag, looking around, and realized no one had even thought to let me know this was happening. Later that evening, my mom told me it was just temporary. She didn't look me in the eyes. She said they just needed a place to stay while they figured things out. I didn't ask questions. I didn't make a scene, but something deep inside me started to close off. I had spent years holding this house together. I paid the mortgage. I fixed the broken water heater. I stocked the fridge, and now I was the one being pushed to the side. Within days, I was moved to the basement. My room was given to Derek and Megan because their kids needed space. The basement smelled like damp concrete and laundry detergent. The ceiling was so low I had to duck in some corners. The washer and dryer shook the walls at night. There was a draft coming in from somewhere, and no matter how many blankets I used, I was always cold. Still, I didn't complain. When Megan mentioned the noise from the city bus outside the window, Mom nodded sympathetically and said she would see what she could do about it. When Derek asked if there was a better mattress for their bed, Dad offered to help him buy one. When I said nothing, no one noticed. I went to work, came home, and went straight to the basement. Sometimes I ate dinner alone down there because the kitchen was too crowded with bottles, sippy cups, and complaints. Every time I passed by my old bedroom door, I saw it transformed into something new. The walls were covered in posters of cartoon animals. There was a crib by the window and a white noise machine humming softly. Megan had rearranged the furniture. Derek had put up some shelves. They were comfortable. They were settled. It was clear they weren't leaving anytime soon. I started to feel like a stranger in my own home. I couldn't relax in the living room. Their things were everywhere. The kitchen was always a mess, and I didn't have the energy to clean it after my shifts. Sometimes I'd open the fridge and find that the food I bought had already been eaten. They never asked if it was okay. They never said thank you. I tried to find small moments for myself. A cup of coffee before my shift, a quiet walk around the block after dinner. But even those were hard to come by. If I sat alone at the table, one of the kids would climb into my lap, or Megan would ask me to help with something. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just kept nodding, kept being the strong one. Dad told me once that I had always been reliable. That's why they didn't worry about me. I could take care of myself, but being reliable meant I was invisible. Being the one they didn't worry about meant I was the one they didn't see. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of arguing upstairs. Derek and Megan had loud fights. He blamed her for the business failure. She said he didn't try hard enough. I could hear every word through the vents. I would pull the blanket over my head and stare at the wall, wondering how long I was supposed to keep pretending this was normal. My body was tired, but it was nothing compared to how tired my heart felt. I felt used. Not in a dramatic, movie kind of way, but in the slow, grinding way that makes you numb. Like your presence is expected but not appreciated. Like you exist only to carry weight for other people. The worst part was knowing they thought it was okay, that it made perfect sense for me to be downstairs, giving up my space, my peace, and my routine. Because I didn't have kids, because I wasn't in crisis, because I had a job. They acted like that meant I didn't have needs, that I didn't deserve comfort. I started going to work earlier just so I could have a few extra minutes in a place that felt calm. At least there, my name meant something. At least there, people said thank you. I would sit in the break room with a paper cup of coffee and try not to think about going home. Home wasn't home anymore. It was a place where I slept in the basement while strangers lived upstairs. I told myself I could wait it out, that something would change. But deep down, I knew nothing was going to change unless I made it change. I wasn't ready yet, but I was beginning to understand that the life I had been building was never really mine. It had always been borrowed, temporary. And now I was the only one without a room of her own. I didn't know when, but something in me had started counting down. One evening, I came home from work more tired than usual. My shift at the hospital had been long, and all I wanted was to take off my shoes, warm up some leftovers, and fall asleep early. As I stepped down into the basement, I noticed my mom standing at the bottom of the stairs. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, one of those printed spreadsheets she liked to make when organizing bills. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was something about taxes or utilities. But she looked serious. She handed me the paper and said that she and Dad had gone over the household expenses. With a straight face, she told me they needed me to start paying $1,800 a month instead of $1,200. I blinked, thinking maybe I heard wrong. I was already paying the mortgage. I was already sleeping in a basement room with no windows. I was already the one buying the groceries most weeks. It felt like a joke, but she wasn't joking. She said the water bill had gone up, the electric bill was higher, and the washer and dryer were running every day now because of the kids. She said it was only fair that I covered more. I looked at her, the woman I had taken care of for years, the one I drove to appointments, the one I helped after surgeries, the one I never asked anything from, and now she was standing in front of me, telling me to pay more so her son and his family could live upstairs for free. I felt something cold and heavy settle inside me. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just said I would send the money on Friday. She smiled, like a problem had been solved, and walked away without asking how I felt about any of it. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after she left. The room felt smaller than ever. The walls were closing in. I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. Not seriously, just looking. But something about it felt different this time. I wasn't just daydreaming. I was starting to plan. The next few days were a blur. I kept showing up for work. I kept saying good morning in the kitchen. I kept folding my parents' laundry when I saw it sitting in the dryer. But inside, something had shifted. I couldn't unsee what was happening now. I had always told myself that helping them was a choice. That being the responsible one was something I had decided to do. But now I realized they were choosing for me. And they weren't even asking anymore. I started noticing little things I hadn't paid attention to before, like how Megan never cleaned up after the kids, how Derek always left dishes in the sink and never once took the trash out, how the lights in the living room stayed on all night even when no one was in there. All those little expenses that now somehow belonged to me. And every time I thought about bringing it up, I remembered the look on my mom's face. That calm, polite certainty, like she had already decided what I owed, and nothing I said would change it. That's when it hit me. I wasn't living in a home. I was living in a transaction. One night, I checked my bank account and realized I had enough saved for a deposit and first month's rent on a decent apartment. Nothing fancy, just a small place not too far from the hospital. I bookmarked a few listings. I didn't tell anyone. I kept nodding when they asked if I was okay. I smiled when the kids ran past me, spilling juice on the floor. I didn't say a word when I found my dinner eaten, or when I heard Megan talking on the phone about how tight things were right now. The idea of leaving started to grow in me like a quiet thought that wouldn't go away. I started walking slower on my way home, taking extra time in the hospital parking lot before driving back. The apartment I paid for didn't feel like a place to rest anymore. It felt like a place I was paying to suffer in. Every sound upstairs was a reminder. Every slammed door, every crying baby, every fake smile from Derek or Megan. It was all noise I had learned to live with. Until I couldn't anymore. I watched as the people I loved took and took, not out of malice, but out of habit. They had gotten used to me being the one who never said no. And I had let them. I thought if I just gave enough, they would one day look at me and say thank you. I thought maybe they would see me, really see me, and realize how much I had done. But now I understood that wasn't going to happen. They didn't see me because they never had to. I made things easy for them. I made things smooth and quiet. I cleaned up all the messes so they never had to deal with the consequences. I gave them comfort, and in return, they gave me expectations. They gave me more weight to carry. I stared at my laptop screen and moved the cursor over the contact button on one of the listings. My heart was racing, but my hand was steady. I didn't click it yet. Not that night, but I knew it was coming. I knew the moment was closer than ever. The rent increase wasn't just about money. It was a line they crossed without blinking. And I was finally starting to see the cost of staying quiet. Something inside me was done pretending. I signed the lease the next morning. I didn't overthink it. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even take a moment to second-guess myself. The apartment wasn't big, but it was perfect. One bedroom, a small kitchen, and a clean bathroom. It was in Scott's Edge, just 15 minutes from the hospital. The walls were white, the windows were large, and when I opened the door, there was no smell of baby formula or fried food. Just air. Clean, quiet air. I stood in the middle of that empty space and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I paid the first and last month's rent in cash. I didn't want to wait for a paycheck or anyone's approval. I told the landlord I would move in by the weekend. He handed me the keys, and I held them tightly in my hand the entire drive back. It was the first time in years that a set of keys meant freedom. That Friday night, I waited until everyone was asleep. The house was dark except for the glow of a nightlight in the hallway. The TV upstairs was still playing something, but it was low enough that I could move without being noticed. I packed 2 suitcases, just my clothes, my laptop, and my kettle. I left everything else behind. The furniture, the dishes, the blankets I had folded 100 times. None of it felt like mine anymore. I moved slowly, not because I was scared, but because I was calm. This wasn't an escape. This was a decision. I was done asking for space in a place I paid for. I was done shrinking myself to fit into someone else's comfort. When I reached the front door with my bags, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Derek, half awake and rubbing his eyes. He looked confused for a second, then shrugged. I told him I was going on a work trip to Raleigh. He nodded like it didn't matter. And that was the final confirmation I needed. It really didn't matter to them where I went, as long as they could stay. I walked out without looking back. I didn't leave a note. I didn't turn off the lights. I didn't text my mom or dad to explain. I just left. The air outside was cool and smelled like rain. My car was quiet as I drove through the empty streets. For the first time in years, I wasn't going home. I was going toward something new. That night, I slept in my new apartment on a mattress still wrapped in plastic. I ordered cheap takeout, sat on the floor, and listened to the silence. There was no baby crying, no footsteps above my head, no dishwasher humming in the background, just silence. I didn't even realize I was crying until the tears started falling. Not from sadness, from relief. My body felt like it had been holding its breath for years, and now it could finally exhale. The next morning, I made coffee and watched the sun rise through the big living room window. It was quiet. peaceful. And I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone. My phone stayed silent the whole day. No one noticed I was gone. No one called. No one asked where I was or if I was okay. That should have hurt, but it didn't. It just proved what I had always known deep down. I had been useful, not loved. I started making a new routine. I unpacked one box at a time. I bought a lamp. I picked out a couch. I didn't rush anything. I wanted every item in that apartment to be mine. Not borrowed, not handed down, not something I bought while trying to please someone else. Just mine. I put on music when I cooked. I left the bathroom door open. I danced barefoot in the kitchen just because I could. At work, I didn't talk about the move. I kept my head down, focused on my patients, and smiled when someone asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. And for the first time, I meant it. My energy came back slowly. I slept better. I didn't wake up angry or anxious. I didn't have to brace myself before walking through the door. I could rest. I could think. I could just be. But I knew it wouldn't stay quiet forever. I knew at some point they'd realize I was gone. I didn't care. I wasn't hiding. I had left. And if they called, I didn't know if I would answer. Not because I was trying to punish them, but because I was learning what it meant to protect my peace. I had spent my whole life giving and giving, hoping someone would one day give back. But now I understood that waiting for people to care the way you care is a trap. Some people only know how to take, and the longer you let them, the more invisible you become. My apartment was small, my bed was low to the ground, my fridge was half empty, but I was more at home than I had ever been in that big house full of people who barely noticed I was there. And as I sat in the quiet that Sunday evening, legs curled under me on my brand new couch, I felt the stillness settle in again. This was the life I built for myself. Simple, clean, quiet. And for once, no one else got to take it from me. A week passed before my phone finally rang. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I was sitting on my small balcony, drinking coffee and enjoying the breeze. I hadn't heard anything from my parents since I left, and part of me thought maybe they wouldn't even notice. But there it was, my mom's name lighting up the screen. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Her voice was sharp the moment I picked up. She asked why I hadn't sent the rent. She reminded me that we had agreed on $1,800 a month. Her tone was not curious. It was demanding, like she was speaking to someone who had broken a rule. I waited a moment before answering. I wanted to be clear, but calm. I told her I had moved out. I said the apartment wasn't mine anymore. I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I just said it like it was a fact, because it was. Her silence was loud for a second, and then she started talking fast, throwing out all the things they had planned. She said they had counted on my payment. They needed it to cover groceries, bills, things for the kids. She acted surprised, like this was all new. Like I hadn't been sleeping in a basement for months, like they hadn't forced me into a corner. She kept saying they had counted on me, but really, they had used me. They expected me to carry everyone because I always had. Then she brought up Derek and the kids, like their presence excused everything. She said I was being selfish, that family meant helping each other, that Derek was going through a hard time and didn't have another option. Her voice got louder, faster, more emotional. She said I was punishing them, but I wasn't punishing anyone. I was done being the only one sacrificing. I had given enough. I had given silently, patiently, for years. And when I finally said no, it became a problem. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I told her again that I had moved out and wouldn't be sending any more money. I told her the apartment, the bills, the responsibility, none of it belonged to me anymore. Then I ended the call and blocked her number. Not because I hated her, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I needed space. I needed silence. I sat on the balcony for a long time after that. The sun was warm on my arms. A few cars passed by on the street, and somewhere in the distance, someone was mowing their lawn. It all felt normal, peaceful. My phone didn't ring again. No one tried to call back. It was quiet in a way that felt strange at first, but also safe. I didn't cry. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't question my decision. For once, I didn't doubt myself. Setting that boundary wasn't cruel. It was survival. I had lived too long in a house that only saw me as a solution, a wallet, a backup plan. Now I was something else, I was just a woman in her own home, drinking coffee and not apologizing for choosing peace. I knew the silence wouldn't last forever. I knew they might try again. They might email me, show up at work, or send someone else to talk on their behalf. But they would no longer reach me the same way. Something had changed in me, and it couldn't be undone. I had spent so much of my life trying to earn love through usefulness. But that day, on the balcony, I finally understood love that has to be earned like that was never love at all. 3 months passed, and in that time, I rebuilt something that looked and felt like a life. My own life. The apartment started to feel like home. I bought a new couch, soft and wide enough to stretch out on after long hospital shifts. I hung curtains in the living room, not because I had to, but because I liked how the light looked in the mornings when it filtered through the fabric. For the first time, I picked things for myself, not for function, not to make others comfortable, just because they made me happy. I started small traditions. Every Saturday, I walked to a little coffee shop 2 blocks away. The staff already knew my order. I would sit by the window, sip slowly, and people watch. I made it a rule to leave my phone on silent during those hours, tucked deep in my bag. I didn't scroll. I didn't check messages. I just sat with my thoughts and let the quiet settle in. The silence, once unfamiliar, became something I looked forward to. I no longer had to brace myself for someone's complaint, someone's request, or someone's guilt-laced reminder that I wasn't doing enough. In this new chapter, no one expected anything from me. No one treated me like a walking ATM. No one hovered behind my shoulder, waiting to see if I would cave and give a little more. The silence was mine, and it felt like peace. It didn't take long before the messages started coming. Not directly. My mother knew she couldn't reach me anymore, but she started texting from unknown numbers. The messages were always short, always the same kind of tone. She would say things like, Derek was struggling again. The business deal he had lined up fell through. Megan was pregnant with their second child. They were behind on rent. The kids had outgrown their clothes. She asked if I could just help this one last time. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask how I was doing. There were no messages saying they missed me or that they understood why I left. It was always about them, their needs, their struggles, their expectations. As if I had only stepped away for a little break and would be ready to step back into my old role at any moment. But I didn't answer. I read the messages once, then deleted them. I didn't cry. I didn't feel tempted. I felt calm. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I had already done that for years without using words, through actions, through quiet sacrifice, through always saying yes. Now I had said no, and no was enough. At work, I started smiling more. Not fake smiles, real ones. I stayed after my shift once in a while to chat with coworkers. I joined a small book club at the hospital. I even took a weekend trip to the mountains by myself, just to see what it felt like to do something without asking permission. It felt like breathing after years underwater. I still thought about my family. I still remembered birthdays, still pictured my father sitting in his recliner or my mom folding laundry in the living room. But those thoughts didn't hurt anymore. They were just memories, pieces of a life that had taught me hard lessons about boundaries, self-worth, and how quiet love can be when you start directing it inward. I didn't hate them. That surprised me. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just didn't belong in that version of family anymore. I had been the support beam for too long, and no one noticed how tired I was until I walked away. Even then, they didn't see my absence as loss. They saw it as inconvenience. But I was no longer trying to be noticed. I wasn't waiting to be thanked or forgiven or welcomed back. I wasn't angry. I was done. And that was more powerful than any dramatic goodbye could ever be. Now I'm just Katie, not the one who fixes things. Not the reliable daughter. Not the sister who pays for everything. Just Katie. A woman who chooses her own curtains, who drinks coffee in silence, who sleeps through the night without being woken up by someone else's needs, who knows what peace tastes like. And I know one thing for sure, I'm never going back.